Good morning, Berry Quest. After Simon's comment about my squawking voice yesterday, I'm hoping that I've given you a nice wake up. First of all, I'm proud of you for being here at 8:30. We're a little bit thin on the ground compared to yesterday, and I have heard vicious and unfounded rumours that people were stumbling in at 2 a.m. Not me. I had mineral water and went to bed at 9:30. But welcome to day 2 of Berry Quest. We are very pleased that you're here, and we hope that you had a wonderful evening last night and a great day yesterday. We've got plenty on offer for today, starting with everybody's favourite and most scintillating topic, food safety. Moving into a workforce session where we're going to have a panel, and then after morning tea we've got the marketing people, and their whole job is to give us a bit of a razzmatazz, so hopefully that will be the case. A few announcements. A couple of people have said they're been worried about whether or not there will be buses to the gala dinner. Yes, there will be buses continuously from here, leaving from 6 and obviously coming back home again at a reasonable hour. People who wish to come home at unreasonable hours will have to make their own way home. So let's get on with the day. Jam-packed agenda, and we need to finish on time so we can get all glamorous for the dinner. Okay, may I have the presentation, please, AV people? All right. So, a mandatory food safety scheme, an unfinished story. Shall we begin? So, I can't read that, it's absolutely tiny, so I'm going to have to kind of read up here, but is there any way... thank you. So, a lot of people don't actually realise that there is not a regulated standard for horticulture. Most, but not all, growers operate under a standard like Fresh Care, which is a supply chain driven, technically voluntary standard. Now, Fresh Care was developed by industry and has been in operation since 2000, and Jane Seabum, the CEO of Fresh Care, will be speaking to you soon. Now, many of you understand these terms. Prior to the introduction of HARPS, which is the harmonised blah blah blah, I can't remember, retailers also had their own standards, so a grower would be subject to multiple audits, and the whole idea of HARPS was to reduce that. Now, many of you know that to be considered a base standard under HARPS, all schemes have to be benchmarked against the Global Food Safety Initiative. So that's the context. This is a diagram of our food regulatory system. It's helpful that we have a picture of Australia and New Zealand, because you've probably guessed that the A in FSANZ is Australia and the NZ is New Zealand. And the Ministers for Food Regulation set the overarching food policy, then FSANZ, or Food Standards Australia and New Zealand, develop and administer the Food Standards Code, and then this is where it all gets a bit bonkers. It's all enforced by the states. And let's just say that's where the games begin. So here's a little bit of a timeline. In 2011, there was a direction from the food ministers that FSANZ was to undertake a consultation to investigate whether or not we needed a mandatory standard for all of horticulture. Now, for my sins, I have actually been involved in horticulture for 18 years now, so I was involved in that particular consultation. And the really strong argument was that essentially the only people who need to be regulated are those who are not already under an existing standard. So we went through this massive consultation process, and yes, the cost-benefit analysis found that we could not justify a mandatory standard for horticulture because so many people were captured under the voluntary schemes. Bingo. Unfortunately, we had 2 food safety incidents. We had, I believe it was Listeria in melons and Salmonella in leafy greens, and people died. So, that's not awesome. Stuff needed to be done. We also had a needle tampering incident, some of you may be familiar with, in 2018. And the ministers got together, and for reasons we've never really been clear on, decided that we needed to have an investigation into whether we needed a mandatory standard for melons, leafy greens and berries. My personal view is that berries got captured because of all the noise around the needle tampering incident, but I think most of us are clear on the fact that tampering is actually not a food safety issue. So that's when we started on this very long journey of consultation. And in August 2022, FSANZ releases what's called the PPP standard, I don't know why it's called that, for melons, leafy greens and berries. And the focus was on growers not already on a scheme to be captured. So the cost-benefit analysis was based on the value to the Australian community of reduced food safety risk and to industry, because let's face it, a food safety incident is a pretty unfortunate thing for an industry. And so this was predicated on that, and essentially the value proposition came forward that there was a justification for a mandatory food safety standard that captured those growers who were operating outside of an existing scheme. I think the other important thing to remember is that when this was first put on the table, it was called a mandatory standard for high risk horticulture. And I threw my toys out of the cot and said, there is no justification to describe berries as high risk. And what does that say to the community and to our consumers? So anyway, we managed to get it turned into PPP, and hopefully Fazana can tell us what that stands for. So that was in August 2022. So the standard was then handed over to the states, and there was a statement in there saying that the existing schemes meet the requirements of the standard. And the implementation date was the 12th of February 2025, last week, or was it the week before? Anyway, where are we? So, like I said, the crazy twist. Once we started the consultation, as I said, 4 years of consultation, then in 2022, the states get hold of the standard, and suddenly they forget, it would appear, that they were supposed to recognise the existing global food safety schemes. And they created this elaborate and expensive architecture of compliance. I've shown here the New South Wales example, where essentially for a berry grower, so in the original FSANZ cost-benefit analysis, it was based on the fact that it would cost a berry grower $30, because unlike melons and leafy greens, once again, I'm going to take credit for this, we managed to get it, that berries only needed to register rather than have a food safety management statement. It was supposed to cost berries $30. That's how the cost-benefit analysis stacked up. In New South Wales alone, we were looking at a $630 compliance cost, at least an $85 registration cost, a $300 licensing cost, and then, out of nowhere, that no one had ever heard before until late last year, a vehicle licensing cost for every vehicle that transports berries from the field to the pack house, from the pack house to the distribution centre, all of the different models, every vehicle. So we did some analysis and we worked out that this was a $145,000 annual cost imposition on the New South Wales berry industry alone. So this is just New South Wales, and this is just berries. Suddenly this cost-benefit analysis, it's not really stacking up anymore. So what happens next? Well, actually I'm going to jump a little bit here, because the one state, or there's two states that have got their act together, and that's Western Australia and Victoria. And that's because they did as they were told. What was agreed? So, in Victoria, berry businesses need to register on Agriculture Victoria Connect. They need to provide their business details, provide a brief description of how the business is meeting the standards, or provide their current recognised scheme certificate, and pay an annual registration fee of between $33 to $653. But that $653 won't capture many berry businesses, because that's quite a significant hectare requirement. And also they're offering, I think, completely waiving the registration costs for the first 6 months, then going to be half the cost for the next 2 years, and they're even looking at not even having an annual fee. So Victoria, I have to say, have gone to the top of the class. Western Australia too have a basic system where you register, it's all done through the states, and again through the local government, sorry Helen, and it's a much more straightforward system. That's how it was meant to be. So where are we at now? So, the even crazier twist. On the 11th of February, remembering that this was all supposed to come in on the 12th of February, an industry posse consisting of myself, representatives from the melon industry, the vegetable industry and the fresh markets, met with some ministerial advisors from the Department of Ag and the Department of Health, set up by none other than Richard, our MC, in his capacity as the NFF Executive Officer. On the 12th, NFF Hawke Council Executive Officer, like I said, 12th of February, only Victoria and WA ready to go. And then I'm not exactly sure on which date because we've never actually seen the letter, but it's been read to me. The Federal Food Minister sends a letter to all of the states requesting that they go back to the drawing board, recognise the Global Food Safety Initiative schemes and ensure the schemes are harmonised across states. Now you may wonder why I've got a picture of Henry Parkes here, looking a bit grumpy. He's the father of Federation. In 1889, he gave the Federation oration in Tenterfield. In 1901, they'd sorted Federation. I'm thinking about AgVet Chemicals, where we heard yesterday that 25 years later, we still haven't sorted it. These guys could federate a whole country in 11 years with no computers. I have no faith in a post hoc harmonisation process. So, what's next? Yippee! Another round of consultation. Perhaps I could pull out of the bottom drawer the 27 submissions I've already done on this. And we have an implementation date of the 12th of February 2026. And hopefully we end up with something close to Victoria or WA. And just to make it even more fun, thankfully, even though it's going to be a pain, there is going to be a review of that whole process from start to finish, because perhaps if before the ministers made this initial decision, they'd actually consulted with industry and done a little bit of an assessment as to which industries had had food safety incidents. So bearing in mind, there has never been a food safety incident in Australian grown berries, but there has been in sweet corn. So why were they not in there? So the whole thing has been absolutely crazy from start to finish. So when we first put this talk on the agenda, I was going to tell you about all of the different models being implemented by the different states. But obviously, I couldn't do that. So I thought I'd just take you on our little journey and give you some context for where we sit today. And I'll now hand over to our next speaker, who is Fazana. But I do want to say, I absolutely believe that a high standard of food safety is vital for the success of this industry. I have no issue with those growers who are not operating under a scheme being captured. They represent a risk to every single one of us. What I don't support is regulation and cost with no actual benefit, and that's where we were heading. So fingers crossed, in a year's time, I'll be a happy camper, and when we have the Berry Quest in 2 years' time, it'll all be bedded in, and this will all be a distant and unhappy memory. Thank you.